Cents Per Mile, featuring Charles Gracie, Paul Gibson, and Josh Haynes. Everyone knows the trucking industry has issues, but most people are afraid to talk about it.
Someone's got to do it.
With loads of recruiting and marketing experience and backed by the largest driver audience in the world, we deliver carriers the driver perspective, find solutions, and help make sense make sense.
Welcome to Cents Per Mile, the most incredible, absolutely fantastic podcast in trucking. Nobody does it like we do, folks. Nobody. We're talking about the biggest news, the best insights, all to make trucking great again. Number one podcast. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson.
Hey, I'm Josh Haynes. That was weird. Paul, you look really disturbed. What are we talking about today there, buddy?
Well,
Today's 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah. I mean, well, in case you forgot, because the news moves so fast now, we're talking about the 24-hour news cycle. You probably forgot when Charles talked about it, but because everything goes so fast now, we are back in a time period where the news cycle has gone from more, we kind of got to a week, but now we're back to 24 hours-ish. By the time we're recording this, do you remember when TikTok got banned? Yeah, right. It was like somewhere between now and the War of 1812. So that's where we're at. And so we obviously, this is going to be the first week where you realize we do record this a little bit early. I'm sure there's been several days worth of stuff that's happened between then and the time they were watching this. So this probably feels like a History Channel show now when you're watching it. But yeah, we're going to kind of go over some early stuff that happened with some of the executive orders and stuff like that, and what that looks like mostly for trucking, hopefully for everybody watching.
Yeah, but we got to go through the normal routine. So
what? Oh yeah, I guess something has to stay normal. All right, well, just in case, if you're watching this, just so you know, you can find us anywhere that you get your podcasts, Amazon, iTunes, Apple Music, I guess is what, sorry. Yep. Yeah, we do have to do that. So anywhere that you get your podcasts, you can find us, whether it's on Amazon Music, Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast content. And if you could subscribe, rate, it helps get us some momentum, pushes us out there a little bit further so we can do more fun stuff.
you can also go to centspermilepodcast.com where you can suggest a topic to be a guest or even to become a sponsor for the number one podcast in the world.
Yep. You can become a sponsor. But today, real quick, we don't actually have one. So shout out to CDLLife and Hot Seat Services, because we're podcasters, but we also have day jobs.
And this could be your spot if you were a sponsor. So check out centspermilepodcast.com.
All right. Well, just like every other 5 minutes, it's time for the news. All right, so it's time for 10-2 News, where we go back and look at the last couple days, and we check out some of the most interesting, relevant stories that we can find on CDLLife.com and maybe some other places. So one of the things is Trump, in one of his executive orders, he basically throws a bunch of stuff that federal agencies can do for 60 days. One of them was the FMCSA. So, while there might be a lot of different environmental stuff and other things that get held up, one of them, bright shining spot, was the FMCSA. So anything they were doing, they can't do it for 60 days. So that means pretty much, I don't think there was anything in the pipeline that was going to help drivers or make their lives easier. So I guess he did kind of give them a 60-day pause from things that, like the speed limiter mandate is like, you can't do anything with that. Can't do anything, with that TWIC card stuff that we talked about last week.
You know what? Go in the way, 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 way back machine, the reflective triangles.
Yeah. Right. And that's what I meant, like for the self-driving trucks and getting that for autonomous trucks. So everything kind of gets paused for a little bit. So that's a nice break, considering, how many other things in the day-to-day world is changing. Why can we keep this part of it?
Just
the
do we need to keep the FMCSA?
I mean, I think the FMCSA serves a purpose. I just think they've also been serving other purposes. Um, it is interesting. I'd be curious from like an insurance company standpoint and that lobby, what that looks like for them and how they feel about it.
There's a lot going on. I mean, look, we're talking news right now, and we're going to shift to our next news story, and that's Trump prepares opening moves on trade. All right, so we're starting to notice the theme already. A couple days into the new administration, Trump. This one came off freightwaves.com. Following his inauguration on Monday, President Donald Trump set his sights on dramatic restructuring of global trade. It was something he talked about in his campaign. We knew it was coming. Tariffs delayed as a strategy comes into focus. On his first evening in office, Trump announced plans to impose tariffs of up to 25% on imports in Canada and Mexico, citing concerns over immigration and trade imbalances. While these tariffs were initially set to commence immediately, no tariffs were implemented on day one, granting a stay of execution to foreign markets and jittery stakeholders.
Well, I would say, so the tariff thing, obviously we talked about it with, we have a couple people on, we've talked about it. And I think it's interesting that it wasn't day one, because sometimes politicians do that where they say things that they're going to do. At times they're going to do it, but they don't. But the other interesting thing, working in trucking, to kind of bring that in, obviously tariffs by themselves have to do with that. But did you notice it said, working in recruiting and marketing, which is our main thing, it said up to.
Mm-hmm.
It said up to, so
it's spreading.
It went from that could mean like, oh, it's 1%. Just
gave you recruiter PTSD. No, but one thing he did say is Trump stated that he's considering February 1st as a deadline for tariffs against Canada and Mexico, directing federal agencies to evaluate existing trade policies and assess compliance with the recent trade agreements, like the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. I think that's something to be paying attention to, because we knew that volume had kind of inflated a little bit because people were trying to get everything they could before these tariffs came into effect. And I imagine they're going to stay on course with that. But come February 1st as a deadline, that conversation could change dramatically. And I think paying attention to where it's going and the tone of it is going to be critical. I do think there's a little bit of a game of chicken there. You saw Canada's response to the tariffs. I do think that there's politics happening in politics, and that's just not something we've seen in the last 4 years.
I mean, it is. It's just the politics that we got used to for a while. We're
no longer debating ice cream flavors or nap times.
Yeah, it's kind of back to the WWE vibes a little bit.
Isn't the WWE involved? I want to verify this, but I'm pretty sure Linda McMahon somewhere behind this transition, if I remember correctly.
She actually was a huge part of it, yes, and staffing and that kind of thing. With I think it was the American First Policy Institute, but yeah, I'm also right now. I'm just like, I want to see Bernie Sanders with a chair.
I was about to say, could you imagine the debates if we threw a steel chair in the mix? I'd tune into those.
We're coming for the 1%. He's got a chair over his head. But yeah, no, I think the tariff thing is interesting because we've talked about it. Like it theoretically, protectionist trade, the way it was. And then we kind of opened up to free trade. And then now we're like, oh, maybe that was bad for manufacturing. We should go back. I don't disagree with that. But the growing pains to go back to a more protectionist trade, or as some people like to say, America first, the growing pains for that would be pretty intense.
Yeah, and there's a lot to digest here. Like we said earlier in the episode, this is a high volume news, ever changing market right now. I mean, what we're talking about today could be completely different tomorrow. More than half of America voted for that. So with that being said, we went Trump news. I'm going to kind of throw an audible in here. I was looking through to see, because we know there's a huge cold snap that's coming through right now. It's impacting a great section of the United States that typically doesn't get it. I mean, there was even videos of snow in Florida. So I went to CDLLife.com. I love getting my trucking news here. You can kind of get a little taste of everything. And I'm just going to read some of the headlines that I'm seeing right now as of today. So, mobile home gets hung up on railroad tracks during haul. New Mexico sheriff is investigating why that thing stuck. I mean, it is truly a mobile home on those train tracks.
You know,
yeah. Then you got the black ice in Houston causing the I-69 crash involving 4 semi-trucks. Then 16 vehicle crash reported on Michigan interstates. And then you got this one stuck out to me. I'm actually going to open it up and we'll dive into it. High crash zone takes out multiple cows when cattle hauler overturns. So several cows are dead after a livestock hauler flipped on a notoriously dangerous curve in North Carolina on Tuesday morning. The accident happened on January 21st around 12:30 a.m. on the ramp of I-85 going to I-77 near Charlotte. According to the news, the truck and trailer made a sharp left curve deemed a high crash zone at a higher speed when it overturned, trapping about 40 cows inside and killing several others. The truck driver was not hurt in the incident. You know, that's great news. Police and cattle wranglers were called to the scene to get together all the surviving cows. So this is unique. And the reason I thought it was unique is everything in the news right now is Trump, current administration, tariffs, executive orders. I mean, Paul, you and I talk outside of the show pretty frequently, and even our conversations daily, which generally don't revolve around politics for very healthy friendship purposes, have now included politics. It's kind of hard not to talk politics in this world, but here, you know, it's nice to see there's still life going on outside of the White House.
Well, okay, so there's like 5 things with that. One, poor cows. That was rude. You can't say there's life going on outside of the White House when the story started with 7 cows are dead. There's politics and there's death.
Holy cow!
Right, and I would say that no, we are friends, we are reasonable, and we are people. And the problem, I think, with a lot of the divisiveness is that people can't have conversations when they have different perspectives, or empathize, or at least try to see the other side of things at all. And I'm still having trouble seeing your side of things in this situation. Because
is it the stash or newspaper boy? I'm
lobbying.
There's a lot of open media jobs about to happen.
It's because I can't understand how with that story you missed the ability to say there's no reason to cry over spilled milk. The driver is fine.
Paul, all right, listen, I showed up in my shirt, my tie, my newspaper boy hat, the fresh stash. There is a lot of legacy media that's going to be looking for fresh talent, and you're coming in there with the puns trying to take my chance.
Hey, man, I'm already dressed up more than John Fetterman. I might as well run for Senate. You can report on me.
All right, moving into our next one, we're going back to the theme of today's news. This one's on FreightWaves. Fight over truck broker contracts awaits Trump's next move. This one came out from FreightWaves on January 17th, and it's talking about how President Trump sided with owner-operators lining the National Mall with their rigs protesting the alleged price gouging by truck brokers. All they want is to be treated fairly. We're going to treat them fairly. This was a quote that came from Trump on Fox and Friends at the time. They're great people. They're successful. They have these big, beautiful trucks. I love that. Some emphasis on the trucks. Hold on. Let me do that one more time for you, Paul. These big, beautiful trucks.
I'm not rubbing my face at that. He says big, beautiful trucks. And I can't forget that time when he got in one. And he just got in there and he was just like, it's like how I imagine somebody from the ATA pretends they're in a truck.
Well, no, there's people in those cartoon truck mascots that walk around.
Right. I'm just talking about when Donald Trump jumped in that one time at the White House. But yeah.
But there's another quote in this article. If there's anybody who thinks they can predict what President Trump is going to do, they're probably not going to be in the industry very long. And that was said by Chris Burrows, President and CEO of the Transportation Intermediaries Association, which lobbies on behalf of brokers. Go figure, they're not happy with this move that the current sitting president is agreeing that we need to have some sort of price control or ceiling on what brokers can charge. I know there's different takes to this. I've even voiced, it's like a lot of things. When you go out and you agree, I'm going to buy this car from this dealer, and then you leave the lot and find out, hey, I agreed at this time, but now I see it somewhere cheaper, or I can get a better deal. You can't be mad at the dealer. You chose. You had a choice to walk off that lot with that car. I feel like there's a fraction of the responsibility that falls on the driver. You don't have to take that load. You can say no. And I think we see it a lot in the recruiting. When you offer people, you and I have talked about this, you offer people a job, they take the job, and then they find a better job. And instead of having a conversation or anything, they just don't show and they burn that bridge. There's different ways you can go about it. I'm not saying each way is a healthy way, but it comes back to the conversations. And I think people need to have those healthy conversations and say, hey, I don't like this price. Can you give me a better one? And if not, move on to the next one.
Well, and I mean, like you could free market, etc. I mean, you want to go back. I mean, look at the show. The first time we had a broker on and did our Ask a Broker Anything, when it came to transparency, he said that it was socialism. We did it the next time and had another broker on, and he took it a step further and called it communism. But at this, regardless, I think my favorite part of this, though, is based on the date that this came out. It came out before the inauguration, and that quote that you mentioned, if there's anybody who thinks they can predict what President Trump is going to do, they're probably not going to be in any industry very long. Well, back to what we talked about earlier, with the FMCSA basically having their hands tied by that regulatory stop, this was part of that. Mm-hmm. So this is frozen. So it's like,
well, absolutely. and so in this article, it actually dives into it. It says at the time when he was siding with the truckers, Trump was facing re-election, and many saw his attention on these issues to placate portion of the voter base. No one knows now that he's in the office if this attention is going to be drawn to this still, or if that was just, a flash in the pan. And it's not unheard of. Politicians saying things during election seasons to get elected.
What?
It doesn't matter which side you sit on. It happens. How many of these are deliverables that are actually going to happen is something we have to pay attention to. And that's why I thought it was kind of interesting. They also go in to talk about fair play and driver fatigue. These are all hot button issues in the trucking industry. Even during the election season, you saw where Vivek went to a truck stop and the drivers welcomed it. It was well received. It was well covered because they're not used to getting a platform where someone's at least listening. You're not even acting, just listening to that people doing the job.
But who was the, after the inauguration, who was like the first person dropped from the team? I was just saying.
Okay, all right. I do think for entertainment's sake, we need to create like a cents per mile board of the current administration, and as they get picked off, just put a red X through them, because the first one, it went pretty much similar to that. So it's interesting to see how many of them are going to stick.
Well, I guess my point is, it's funny that the person that you used as a specific example that actually did go to a truck
is gone already.
And I appreciated him, but he's gone. And so like from my standpoint, kind of hating everything.
It's okay, Paul.
It's interesting to, not just right now, but in general, as far as politics goes, it makes me feel like that might be a constant, or like a constant through this administration from the last administration, and when he was in before that, and the administration before that, that honestly, I bet you drivers just get forgot about again.
Historically speaking, that has been the case. And I mean, we see these things that are getting any sort of life or movement to them, like reflective triangles. Those are tied to autonomous trucks. Everything has always got a string attached to it where, yes, we might get a slight needle move in the right direction, but it truly doesn't benefit the driver. We had someone submit that article that we covered in the way back machine about, 2 background checks being combined into one for your hazmat and your twig. I don't consider that a win for the drivers. And I want to see a win for the driver. If there's anyone in the White House that's listening to this show, give us a win for the drivers. Throw us a bone that benefits today's truck drivers and their experiences on the road.
I also feel like if you just ask for it that way, that's like a monkey paw situation, and there's probably going to be a catch to it. But real quick, we do need to go behind the desk with Tenstreet.
Do you want to grow your fleet but get buried by paperwork, slow hiring processes, and outdated systems, all while struggling to comply with changing safety regulations? Enter Tenstreet, the all-in-one platform that simplifies driver lifecycle management by bringing marketing, recruiting, onboarding, safety, and retention together in one place. Tenstreet coordinates and streamlines all your operations. Post to dozens of job boards at once. Speed time to hire with pre-population and AI to get more full applications faster. And manage the entire post-hire process, from cutting costs with online onboarding to integrating all safety data into one dashboard, to improving retention through thoughtful engagement. Whether you have 1 truck or 1,000, our expert team is here to help. Sleep soundly knowing you can pass an audit, attract needed drivers, and achieve your business goals. Join the thousands of carriers using Tenstreet. Sign up for a demo today.
So it's time to make sense, and we're still talking about the 24-hour news cycle. Like I said, if you're watching this, we're a little over a week out from the inauguration and the start of all the executive orders, so this probably is all old news by now. But I thought it would be fun, Charles in his suit, looking all political, if we tried a little thought exercise.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, I only have little thoughts, so let's go.
All right, well, that's fine. Little thoughts, little hands. But what do you, if you had to come up with a day one executive order, what would it be?
Ooh, I'm going to kind of piss some people off on this one because I'm going right to the industry that I know and love. Day one executive order, I'd want a minimum wage set on all drivers, and it would have to guarantee 80 to 90,000 a year.
So you would just, so how would you implement that?
Immediately, I would sit there and say, all right, this is the minimum wage for this job. This job sucks. We know it sucks. It's critical to our infrastructure and movement through there. So everyone needs to be making this. If they have a CDL and you can represent those costs and pass those down or trickle them down to whoever, I would immediately follow that up with a ceiling for percentages brokers can take. That's just how I feel. You don't have to like me for it, but it is how I feel.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess you could go and you could just kind of gut the FLSA to do that. That's interesting. I'm here for it. I think, but then you also is that a slippery slope because you're setting wages?
Well, CDLs are federally regulated. I'm not a lawyer. I'd get, our armchair attorney friend to validate that. But I'd imagine that there's got to be some sort of connective tissue between being a federally regulated license and having some kind of federal regulation on what's the lowest that they can earn.
Yeah, because I don't know that you could actually do that. But,
I mean, there's a lot of things that get signed in executive orders that can't be done. That's right. What the courts will figure out.
But then it's all just going to end up in a stay immediately. But what you could do is you could reclassify drivers under that act, and then they would immediately be forced to be paid overtime.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when I'm looking at the most systemic problems in trucking and the areas that we can benefit as an industry the most, I know it's not easy, and I know it terrifies employers to think I'm going to pay people more, but there's no reason the people that keep the company moving and that have to be in that position, otherwise you don't have a company, can't be paid enough to survive. There's no reason we can't have programs in place to keep them running, keep them healthy, keep them paid, to pay them for all their time. That's just systemic laziness. That's part of the industry, in my opinion. And I think if all the best and brightest heads in the industry got together and started finding solutions to that, we can come up with ones that would work for everyone. Just no one wants to do it because it's all about me. And that's kind of the problem.
Yeah. One thing I think that I would do, and this would cause chaos, absolute chaos. And maybe I'm just like bitter from like that whole Bucky's date thing that I talked about on the show a few weeks ago, last year, I guess. But I would take any federal property and make it open for truck parking.
Absolutely.
That would be that would be it. And that would
Paul, are we going to run for office together?
I think we should. I mean, if we're gonna cut now, think later, I think there's a lot of cool things that could be done that could change the shape of this industry for drivers and fix it really quick. It would cause a lot of problems, but I think a lot of those problems people would want to solve them very quickly. I don't know.
Bringing people together. Through chaos.
Right. That's my vibe. It's like, you obviously have your thoughts. Mine are just kind of like everything's broken. Let's break it till it works.
So can we cover some of the interesting stuff that's happened though? Like we all pay attention to the executive orders. We all pay attention to the stuff that makes the news, but there's the stuff that's hitting social media, the small little in between the line things, like, during the inauguration, a particular person went around and shook everyone's hand and didn't shake Kamala Harris's hand, and that became a social media story. Or Trump's hand not on the Bible during getting sworn in. I mean, there's a lot. If you look at the news versus social media, you realize quickly how divisive and separate those paths are. What matters to people on social media versus what matters in policy, and how many people are willing to die on those hills. You said it earlier on where we were talking about stuff and conversations. If there's nothing else you take out of this, have these healthy conversations. This is one thing I believe America has gotten away from, not only in the trucking industry, but as a country, being able to have healthy conversations, promote people to think and have ideas that can lead to solutions. And it's kind of what we were about here on the show. But you don't really see it happen too much. Everyone wants to have those token conversations like, I checked the box, I talked about this, but I wasn't really open to receiving the other person's perspective. And you and I sit on opposite sides. We cover it a lot on trucking topics, but very, very rarely cover it on a personal level. We're polar opposites on a lot of things. And you're one of my best friends. You yourself, Josh, and myself have a lot of healthy conversations. And perspectives have changed over time for both of us. I just don't understand why it's so hard for people to do it. Like, why do you have to hate the opposing side?
So that's kind of where it comes down to social media. I think social media and, like the sensationalization of news. When you do have a 24-hour news cycle, you just have to make things look big that are going to grab headlines because you want to get the market share of the views so you can get the ad revenue. Now, what happens is people read these stories about certain people. They take them as like the absolute truth. And then those people make assumptions about this group of people. But this group of people, while they may be guilty of whatever they've been accused of, have never taken the time to get to know the people on the opposite side. So everybody's just making assumptions about each other. And
it's crazy. Like, I would never say, oh, I came across a bad video editor or a bad video creator, and all of you are demonized over it. Mm-hmm. You have bad doctors. That doesn't mean every doctor doesn't give a crap about you. That just means that one might not. And yet here we go. We're back almost automatically. Well, it was happening even during the election cycle, where we're back to demonizing entire groups of people. I mean, if you look at and you and I talked about it the other day, the popular vote, as divisive as it was for this mandate, it was still relatively close when you look at the overall numbers. That means almost half of America voted one way, and a little more than half voted another way.
That's no. 1/4, a little more of about 1/4 of America voted that way, and the other less than a quarter, around a quarter, voted the other way, and then like half of them just didn't vote.
Yeah, all right.
So you can't say, like, that's the other thing, is it's all like America is this or that. It's like, no, like 50% of America is like trying to exist.
Yeah.
Like,
and that in itself is crazy to me. Half of America didn't vote. Like, what are we doing? Instead of fighting each other, we should encourage people to share those opinions, even if we don't agree with them. There's a lot of things you say I don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
We agree to disagree. It's legitimately the premise of our relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of times we've had those conversations like, you know what? We're friends. As soon as I hear that, I'm like, I said something he doesn't agree with.
I think the thing is that we ultimately talk it out till we can at least find common ground, because there is common ground.
Sometimes more painful to get to.
Right. Now, there's certain obviously beliefs that, like, you can't, if you're just assuming the worst of somebody, or you're doing something out of malice and being mean, that's not really fixable. No. You have to acknowledge that people exist. You have to acknowledge them where they are, and then try to find common ground, and then you can change somebody's mind in either direction, or, come to an agreement. But the thing is that we can agree once something is passionate to one of us, like, we're willing to listen to the other person to say, like, hey, this is why this is bad, or I don't know if you've thought about it, but this is actually a good thing. Here's why. And, you back it up with experiences, and you show who it actually affects, and it can change some perspectives. But when you just go off, this is this and this is this, then it never goes anywhere, and it's terrible, and it's team sports, and that only does well for half of us.
Well, and speaking of going off, we have to go to a commercial break.
We talk a lot about the drivers and solutions on cents per mile. And the reason we can talk solutions is we provide them in our day job. At Hot Seat Services, we're all about providing solutions. Instead of throwing at the wall like everyone else and just trying to cram the top of the funnel to see what falls out, we're providing today's top drivers for your top lanes using our professional recruiters, our marketing, to give you a guaranteed cost per hire model. So if you want to hear more about it, check out Hot Seat Services. Let us hire you some drivers today.
And we're back. And there's a lot to digest. A lot's going on out there. We'll be back next week, so make sure you tune in to the Top Trucking Podcast right here, Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. Hopefully this ages well.